the land of rugged mountains and free peasants. While Athens shone with its democracy and Sparta honed its military aristocracy, time flowed differently in the forested and mountainous north of the Balkan Peninsula, in Macedonia. This was a land on the fringes of the Greek world, deemed semi-barbaric by refined Hellenes. Macedonians spoke Greek, but with such a rough accent that it grated on Athenian ears. Across its 30,000 square kilometers lived barely 500,000 people, with scarcely any cities in the Greek sense. Instead of polis with agoras and theaters, there were villages and pastures. Uncover the rise of Macedonia's unstoppable war machine. Subscribe and hit the like button to dive into its epic saga. The population's core consisted of free peasant landowners. Unlike many Greek city-states where land relations grew complex, Macedonia preserved a robust class of independent farmers. This was a society of hardy, simple folk accustomed to labor and defending their land. Alongside them lived a military tribal aristocracy, noble horsemen, whose vast estates and herds of fine horses underpinned their power. These noble clans constantly feuded, dividing the country into tribal principalities, especially in the rugged Upper Macedonia. Tribal ties remained strong, and slavery lingered at a patriarchal level. Slaves were more like extended family members than talking tools. Macedonia's economy was simple and reliable. The land was rich in timber, eagerly bought by Greek cities for their fleets. Its mountains yielded ore for weapon production, and coastal dwellers fished. But the true wealth lay in the fertile plains of Lower Macedonia, ideal for agriculture and, crucially, horse breeding. Here emerged the tradition of raising war horses, which later formed the backbone of the ancient world's finest cavalry, a force the Greeks largely lacked. Political centralization was slow and painful. Only in the 5th century BCE did the kings of Lower Macedonia begin gradually subduing feuding tribes and taming the haughty aristocracy. This struggle spanned a century. By the mid-4th century BCE, a new, powerful state emerged, ready to challenge both fragmented Greece and mighty Persia. Near the sea rose its new capital, Pella. At its helm stood a king, supported by a council of elite aristocrats, hetairoi, or king's companions. Yet his true foundation was the war-weary free peasantry, who saw strong royal authority as a guarantee of peace and stability. These people became the bedrock of Macedonia's invincible war machine, the reformer king with Theban experience. The unification of Macedonia and the creation of a great power are inseparable from one man, Philip II, who ruled from 359 to 336 BCE. His life was remarkable. As a youth, he spent years in Thebes as a political hostage, but this captivity became his greatest education. Thebes was then at its peak, led by the era's greatest general, Epaminondas. Young Philip absorbed everything: the tactics of the Theban oblique phalanx, the coordination of infantry and cavalry, and advanced siege methods. He studied the strengths and weaknesses of Greek city-states, their endless rivalries, and political short-sightedness. Returning home and ascending the throne, Philip launched reforms that transformed the country. He acted methodically and ruthlessly. First, he completed political unification, subjugating Upper Macedonia's nobility. Rather than destroying the aristocracy, he cleverly enlisted it. The finest noblemen became his hetairoi, personal guards, officers, and advisors. Serving the king became the highest honor, turning yesterday's rebellious lords into loyal allies. Second, he reorganized finances. Capturing rich gold and silver mines in Thrace, particularly at Mount Pangaeus, he minted high-quality gold staters. These coins filled the treasury and became a tool of foreign policy. "A donkey laden with gold will take any fortress," a saying attributed to him, reflected his strategy. Philip paid his soldiers generously, hired top engineers, and bribed Greek politicians without hesitation. His greatest reform was military. Replacing unreliable militias and costly Greek mercenaries, he created Europe's first standing, regular national army, numbering 30,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry. Recruitment followed a territorial principle. The country was divided into districts, each supplying a set number of soldiers for infantry or cavalry. Men from the same village or region fought side by side, boosting morale and cohesion. Infantry came from peasants, cavalry from landed nobility. Philip turned the Macedonian people into a unified military camp, ready to march at his command. Bound by iron discipline and constant training, this army became the era's most advanced military instrument, hammer and anvil, the birth of the Macedonian war machine. Philip didn't just create an army. He built a sophisticated tactical system based on the interplay of diverse troop types. His forces were divided into heavy, medium, and light infantry and cavalry, each with a unique battlefield role. The heart of the battle order was the Macedonian phalanx, an unbreakable wall of 16,000 to 18,000 heavily armed sarissa. Unlike Greek hoplites with short spears, Macedonians wielded sarissas, pikes 4 to 6 meters long. The phalanx formed 16 ranks deep, with the first 5 or 6 ranks holding sarissas horizontally, creating a bristling forest of steel tips nearly impossible to breach. Rear ranks angled their pikes to deflect arrows and javelins. Phalangites wore helmets and small shields hung around the neck, freeing both hands for the heavy sarissa. This formidable formation was nearly invincible from the front, but slow and vulnerable on the flanks and rear. Its role was to pin the enemy, serving as the anvil on which the battle's outcome was forged. The hammer was the heavy cavalry of hetairoi, the army's elite, drawn from Macedonian nobility and led by the king himself. Unlike Greeks who used cavalry for scouting or pursuit, Philip made it the decisive striking force. Hetairoi attacked in a dense wedge formation, capable of breaking any infantry line, targeting the enemy's flanks or rear, pinned by the phalanx. Linking the slow phalanx and swift cavalry was the medium infantry, hypaspists, or shield-bearers. These elite mobile troops, armed like Greek hoplites, protected the phalanx's vulnerable flanks, exploited cavalry breakthroughs, or fought on rough terrain. Within them, the argyraspides, or silver shields, formed an elite corps. Light infantry, recruited from poorer peasants and subjugated tribes, and light cavalry initiated battles, harassed enemies with bows, slings and javelins, guarded flanks and pursued fleeing foes. This diversity gave the Macedonian army unparalleled tactical flexibility. Philip also prioritized siege technology, hiring top engineers for catapults and rams, and built a navy of up to 160 warships by his reign's end. Diplomacy, gold, and the Battle of Chaeronea. Having strengthened Macedonia and forged an unbeatable army, Philip began expansion. He first seized the Thracian coast, gaining control of trade routes and mines. Then, exploiting Greece's sacred war, he intervened in Greek affairs. Siding with Thebes, he crushed their Phocian enemies and secured Thessaly, establishing dominance in northern Greece. These successes divided Greek society. In Athens, the main resistance hub, 2 factions emerged. The pro-Macedonian group, led by orator Socrates, saw Philip as the only force capable of ending inter-polis wars, uniting Greece, and leading a pan-Hellenic campaign against Persia. They dreamed of Persian riches and new settlements in the east to ease overpopulation. Opposing them was the democratic anti-Macedonian faction led by antiquity's greatest orator, Demosthenes. In his famous Philippics, he argued that the Macedonian barbarian brought not salvation but slavery. He urged Athens and all Greeks to unite against the tyrant before it was too late. Demosthenes envisioned a free federation of city-states, not subjugation under a Macedonian king. But the era of polis democracy was fading. Rivalries, internal strife, and Philip's bribes hindered a united front. In 346 BCE, the Peace of Philocrates recognized Macedonia's conquests, but it was a mere pause. In 339 BCE, war flared anew as Philip's army invaded central Greece. Demosthenes forged an anti-Macedonian coalition, including Athens' old rival Thebes. The decisive battle occurred in August 338 BCE near Chaeronea in Boeotia. Both sides fielded about 30,000 men, but the Macedonian army was better organized, armed, and led. Philip commanded the left wing, while his 18-year-old son Alexander led the right. With the elite Hetairoi cavalry, Philip feigned a retreat on his left, luring the Athenians forward. The gap in the Greek lines allowed Alexander's cavalry to strike the Thebans' flank and rear, annihilating their elite sacred band. The Macedonian phalanx's frontal assault completed the rout. The Greek army was shattered, ending classical Greece's independence. Philip, a far-sighted politician, spared Athens' humiliation, offering a generous peace and alliance. Soon the Corinthian Congress united all Greek poleis, except Sparta, into the Hellenic League, under Macedonian hegemony, banning interpolis wars and declaring a pan-Hellenic war against Persia, the heir who eclipsed his father. In 336 BCE, a Macedonian vanguard under veteran general Parmenion crossed into Asia Minor, poised for the Great Campaign. But Philip was assassinated at his daughter's wedding in a palace conspiracy. Greece erupted in anti-Macedonian revolts. Demosthenes, in festive attire, celebrated the tyrant's death in Athens' council. Philip's life's work seemed doomed, yet his 20-year-old son Alexander ascended the throne, dismissed by many as a boy. They were gravely mistaken. Educated by Aristotle, battle-tested in his father's campaigns, and endowed with iron will and military genius, Alexander acted with lightning speed and ruthlessness. He first marched north, crushing barbarian tribes on the Danube. When Thebes rebelled, misled by rumors of his death, Alexander marched his army from Illyria to Boeotia in 14 days, stormed Thebes, and razed it to the ground, enslaving 30,000 residents. This brutal lesson silenced Greek resistance. Returning to Macedonia, Alexander prepared for the Persian campaign. He inherited his father's perfected military machine and grand vision. The army structure remained, but Alexander refined it. The phalanx was divided into smaller, more maneuverable syntagmas, 256 men. The Hypaspist Guard was strengthened. He perfected the hammer and anvil tactic, personally leading cavalry charges on critical sectors, while Parmenion's phalanx pinned the enemy. Logistics were prioritized, with engineers, scholars, traders, and craftsmen supporting long campaigns abroad. In spring 334 BCE, Alexander, leading a united Greco-Macedonian army, crossed the Hellespont, launching a new era in human history. Thanks for joining us to explore the rise of Macedonia's war machine. Subscribe now and like this video to uncover more epic tales of conquest and glory.